Is biodiversity good for our health? Biodiversity is a measure of the different kinds of organisms within a given area and includes variation at the genetic, species, and ecosystem level. Globally, this diversity is declining at an alarming pace. Does this matter? The answer is yes. There are multiple reasons for why biodiversity matters. In my research, together with colleagues, we focus on the role of biodiversity in mitigating transmission risk of pathogens among non-human animals and between non-human animals and humans. Pathogens are organisms or agents that can cause disease and include viruses, bacteria, and fungi. If a pathogen is transmitted between non-human animals and humans, the resulting disease is a zoonosis. COVID-19, Ebola, Lyme disease, and tularemia are some examples. So where does biodiversity come into place here? In functional natural ecosystems, specialist species are often dominating. However, in degraded, disturbed ecosystems, generalist species take over. The brown rat and house mouse are examples of such generalist species. These generalists harbor often pathogens. They are so-called reservoirs. They do this to a higher degree than specialist species. In disturbed ecosystems compared to natural ecosystems, there's therefore a higher risk that pathogens are transferred among reservoirs and from reservoirs to humans. There's mounting evidence that biodiversity has a protective function against pathogen transmission, a concept that we call the dilution effect. Biodiversity dilutes the transmission risk of pathogens via different mechanisms. For example, owls selectively prey on rodents that are infected with certain pathogens. These are potentially rodents that could make us humans sick. So here the owls protect us from infection. Shrews can act as nest predators on newborn voles that otherwise would risk spreading pathogens when getting older. Non-reservoir species that are competitively superior to reservoir species can impede the contact among reservoirs and hence mitigate transmission risk. We know that transmission and disease risk for many rodent-borne pathogens varies among seasons and years. This is at least partly caused by the population dynamics of the rodents. For some pathogens, the proportion of infected animals is higher in spring. In others, the proportion is higher in autumn. We have, however, only started to understand these complex biological and ecological interactions. What complicates the situation even more is that there are also other environmental factors that are important for pathogen transmission. Partly alone, but partly also in interaction with biodiversity. Weather conditions and climate change play an important role. Wetter winters in the north likely prolong the environmental persistence of certain pathogens. This implies that these pathogens are infectious on, for example, the forest floor for a longer time in rainy winters compared to cold, snowy winters. This in turn increases transmission risk with knock-on effects on human health. So back to my initial question. Is biodiversity good for our health? The answer is yes. We can remove the question mark and can state that biodiversity, in fact, is good for our health. This might also imply that when we recover biodiversity, when we restore degraded habitats, that we could restore the protective function of nature. This is very encouraging and, at least in theory, promising. To prevent future epidemics and pandemics, we, however, need to increase our understanding of exactly how biodiversity mitigates disease risk. We need to better understand the mechanisms behind this protective function.